Do we believe in celebrating all diversity?
When Jagmeet Singh was running to lead the New Democrats, he confidently and carefully took on an angry heckler.
We welcome you. We welcome you.
Giving Canadians a glimpse of the savvy politician he might be. Less than 2 months later, he became leader of the NDP and was seen as a fresh, charismatic voice, one that could possibly rival Justin Trudeau for that young, progressive appeal. But in the 16 months or so since then, it's been a bumpy ride.
Tell us whether or not your caucus is behind you in supporting this bill.
At this point, just give me a moment. I have to clarify. So yes, right now our caucus is in support of this bill.
Singh has struggled to find his place on the national stage, and though born in Ontario, he chose to run for a seat out west in Burnaby South.
Hey, how's it going?
He's now busy trying to win what many are calling a do-or-die by-election on February 25th. And with just 9 months until a federal election, he also needs to prepare to lead an entire party, one that's had at least 8 MPs either resign or announce they're not running again.
Hey, how's it going?
I met up with Jagmeet Singh earlier this week in Burnaby. Has the job been harder than you anticipated?
Well, I knew it was going to be a tough job. I knew that getting into this role, it wouldn't be an easy walk. I had a bit of training as deputy leader in Ontario, seeing the work that Andrea did as the leader, and I knew that there was a significant gap between being a deputy leader and being leader, and then the heightened intensity of being a national leader.
Yes.
So I knew that it was going to be difficult.
What do you say to people who say that there have been times where it seems that you've been unprepared? That famous Guy Caron moment where you're like, I don't know. And there have been a couple other moments like that. Did you maybe not realize the preparation it was going to take, that you really have to do a lot of homework when you want to be a federal leader?
Well, I know that it takes time to do preparation. I mean, throughout my life, all of my studies have required lots of prep. I mean, I was a defense lawyer for a number of years, so it takes a lot of work to prep for cases. So there's a lot of work involved in everything that people do. And it's a learning curve, and there's things that I'm going to improve on, and I look forward to those opportunities to improve.
But did that surprise you when people sort of called you out for maybe not being as well briefed as you should be for this job?
Well, on the idea of receiving criticism or feedback on that, I mean, I can take that. Like I know it comes with the territory, it comes with being a national leader, and that's okay.
At one point it was reported you weren't making any money because the party is having some issues, and so you said, I'm not going to take a salary. Has that changed?
No, I'm not taking a paycheck from the party.
Are you taking a paycheck from anywhere?
No, I've got some support from my family. I've got support from friends. I'm doing all right. I've got a lot of resources and a lot of people that help me out and support me.
So let's talk about how the party is struggling a bit financially. People say it takes maybe $40 million to run a campaign. I mean, you're a far cry from that.
We've got challenges, of course, but we're seeing a positive upswing, and we're going to see more and more of that. We're seeing people that are let down on things like commitments to the environment and to reducing our emissions and to tackling climate change, who are not feeling that there's a liberal party that's actually connecting with them, or a conservative that care about this concern, and they're looking at us as leaders on this file.
I want you all to know that I intend to run in the upcoming by-election here in Burnaby South.
Did you choose the riding to take advantage of your pipeline position?
I chose the riding because there's a lot of passion in this riding on the environment, and people want to see us use our public dollars to invest in the green energy of the future and clean, green, renewable jobs that are available, and a sustainable economy. So there's a lot of support for that position.
But the pipeline too. You knew that you'd come out against it, and you knew this is like the epicenter of that debate. So you knew that was going to give you an advantage, certainly.
Well, I know that I've taken a position on that.
Yeah.
But broader than that, people are concerned about the pipeline, but they're actually even more so concerned about what we're doing as a nation and how we're spending our public resources. That's what I've heard at the door again and again. People want to see us commit to a transition to a greener economy, where we actually create great jobs and supports for communities that don't have those jobs, and also reduce our emissions. And that's a really big thing. I hear that across the ride.
If you don't win, and obviously I know you don't want to think that way, but will you stay on as leader? Are you committed to that?
Yeah, I will be the leader that leads the New Democratic Party into the 2019 election. I'm confident we're going to do well in this riding.
Tom Mulcair says you can't stay. What do you say to him?
What I'm concerned is not about my future. I've never been concerned about my own future. I'm concerned about the future of this country. And the future of this country will depend on having a strong support or voice in the corner of people saying, hey, we need to have medication coverage for all. We need to make sure we invest in housing. There's got to be a better way.
Are you surprised that Tom Mulcair feels the need to comment on what you're doing so often?
I mean, that's not what I'm hearing at the doors. I knock,
But
hundreds of doors.
He's doing a lot of backseat driving.
Yeah, I mean, I knock on doors every day. This is my job right now. I'm hearing people, and that is not what they're concerned about. They're concerned about, they're not saying
but I'm not asking what the people at the doors are saying. I'm asking you.
That's what I'm worried about.
No,
right?
that's fine. But I'm asking
concern.
you see the former leader of the party who got dumped, talking and criticizing things that you've said and your position going forward. That doesn't bother you, or you don't think that that's strange?
Well, again, I really am focused on how do I help people? And that's not something that I'm hearing at the doors. Like, that type of criticism is not relevant to
what he says.
People,
you're not hearing at the doors.
That's not what people are talking about.
And you don't care. You don't care that he's saying that?
People can, raise concerns if they want. I'm worried about what people who are struggling are telling me and how I can make their lives better.
Mulcair, he won 44 seats in the last election, Tom Mulcair, and he was pushed out. So what do you have to win then? Because that was decent. It was a decent performance, and he couldn't keep his job.
Well, for me, I mean, I'm looking at my performance and how can we make people's lives better? Like, that's my metric. What can we do to advance the conditions that people are living in right now?
I know, but that's not the metric that the party has used in the past. The metric is performance-based. It's not whether people are listening to you talk about issues that I agree are important. So how do you deal with a party who has previously said 44 seats isn't good enough, you're out?
Yeah, my metric is going to be how we make people's lives better, and that's what I'm going to focus in on. I mean, I can't predict the outcome. I know that, but I can predict the outcome in terms of the work we put in.
No,
but you talk about what we're going to raise as concerns.
Sure, but you have evidence of a party that is impatient when you don't do well. So I think it's a legitimate question to say, if you don't do that well, are you concerned about what the reaction might be?
No, I'm not concerned again about myself. I mean, that's never been my concern. I got into this gig in a riding that had never voted NDP in the history of the country. Yeah. So I didn't get in this gig because I was worried about that. I got into this role, this important role, because I want to use the platform that I have to advance a better country.
Okay, you want to talk about some issues, and I do too. So let's start with the pipeline. Sure. How would you get more oil to market, or would you?
In our country right now, we've got two failed processes that this government has continued to use. One is the environmental regulation process is failed, and it's proven to have failed because the courts have found that it failed. So
sure, but they have since revised it, and they've come up with a new process for pipelines going forward.
They've
recognized that.
Yeah, there's some serious concerns, and we pointed those out, and the court supported our concerns. Secondly,
yes, and that's why they've gone back and they're doing further consultations.
Well, now here's a second concern. Yeah. Here's a second concern. On their further consultations, they've already prejudged the outcome. This government has said, we are going to build this pipeline no matter what. Now, that does not really bode well if we want to respect Indigenous communities, if we want to really follow through on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We can't start off saying, we're going to meaningfully consult you, but we've already prejudged the outcome. That is not on.
Are you saying the United Nations Declaration gives Indigenous communities in this country a veto over those projects?
I'm saying that we cannot proceed forward with any project in this country unless we obtain free, prior, and informed consent, unless we have buy-in and partnership. Reconciliation requires hard work, and it requires respect. It doesn't mean we can say that we're going to build something, but then we're going to go out and then consult afterwards. Right. It means accepting that a project may not go ahead.
You are, though, undoubtedly aware of the Supreme Court decision when it came to what a federal government is allowed to do with these kinds of lands. And it says when adequate consultation has occurred, a development can proceed without the consent of an Indigenous group. It is only the Crown's duty to consult and act honorably. It is not the Crown's duty to say, you're right, we're wrong. They are arguing that this is in the national interest. This pipeline is critical. So how do you reconcile those things?
Well, reconciliation requires us to go beyond that. It requires us to re-examine the way we've done things. We've got to actually
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, we've got to be committed to doing more than just checking off a box. That's not enough. That's not actually going to be reconciliation. If you just go say, well, look, I've done this and I've done this, I've checked off a box, that's not meaningful reconciliation.
But so then what should they be doing right now that they're not doing?
Be open to no. I mean, the communities that are impacted, the lands, the sovereign nations that are impacted may not accept that this is a project that they want to support. And that is something that the government has to be prepared to accept. Our public dollars should not be spent on a project that the private sector does not see any profitability. That does not make sense for us to use our public dollars to do that.
Well, the private sector didn't see profitability because it was caught up in the courts, and they were worried that it would just be endless, which is a legitimate concern.
The private sector pulled out. The public dollars, the Canadians' dollars, should be spent on investing in our country in a sustainable way for the future.
But are you then suggesting that we're going to get off oil in a 24-hour period? I mean, there are...
I'm actually making a clear suggestion. I'm saying that with our public dollars, we should be investing in the green economy of the future.
So that we should have just let that pipeline go?
It's with our public dollars, it should not have gone towards that. Yeah, absolutely.
So then what do you say to all the oil workers in Alberta?
They need help. It's not their fault that they're in a sector that's subject to bust and booms. They're in a sector that's so unpredictable. They deserve a lot better. They deserve us to invest immediately and aggressively in a future where they have sustainable jobs.
Right, but
not just for the next couple of years, but for the long term.
But that transition, that takes time, and you have to move in that direction over time. It sounds to me like you're saying, well, too bad, you guys are out of luck because this sector is becoming antiquated. We don't want to be using oil anymore. I mean, that's a fair position, but is that what you're saying? That we shouldn't be investing in the oil sector anymore?
Let's be clear. There is a resource sector in Canada that is going to continue. But I'm saying with our public dollars, we'd be doing a disservice as a country if we didn't say, hey, we acknowledge the unpredictability that these folks are going through. These people are going through hardship. They just want to be able to work and earn a good living for their family. Let's invest our public dollars into something that will be long-lasting and sustainable and not subject to the same volatility.
Okay, let's talk about the other part of that, and that's climate change. The United Nations says that most large emitting countries are not going to meet their targets, their Paris targets, including Canada, even though that's the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister seem to think that we will. I'm not sure how. So that's not going to happen, even though the government has various plans in place to reduce emissions and a carbon tax that's going to take effect. So what would you do more of to try and get us to the Paris targets?
Well, first of all, we need better emissions targets. Secondly,
tougher emissions targets? Is that what you're talking about?
We do. We need better emissions targets. Right now, the emissions targets are still essentially targets that are Harper-era targets that, again, like as you noted and as we all know, will not get us to the Paris Accord target levels. But more importantly,
I know, but we're not even going to meet those, so you want to make it harder.
We should make our levels more ambitious, absolutely. Okay. But what we need to do is, if you look at the current approach this government's taken to the carbon tax, they're putting the burden on everyday families instead of the biggest polluters. The biggest polluters in our country are essentially exempt. We've got coal-based energy plants in New Brunswick that will be exempt almost 90%. So the current approach
at the beginning.
But the current approach this government has taken is effectively the biggest polluters are getting a free ride, and everyday families are going to have to shoulder the burden. That is a very skewed approach.
On China, there's a Canadian right now who's been convicted by a Chinese court to a death sentence for alleged drug smuggling. How would you deal with a situation like that if you were Prime Minister? You've got a country where we seem to be in this terrible diplomatic retaliatory actions, well they do, while we're trying to do things by due process, and they keep escalating things. What should the government be doing in that instance?
Just for a first moment, we've got to just think about what that family is going through right now. Like, that is just horrible, the fear that the family must be facing right now. So what we need to see happen is we got to stand up to China. We have to be ready to stand up to anyone that we need to stand up to.
What does that mean, though, stand up to China?
We've got to say, listen, what you're doing is just wrong. You can't take individual people and use them as political pawns, detain people without due process.
But that's essentially what the Prime Minister did the other day, and then the Chinese government basically told him to shut up.
Well, I mean, we can't stop raising concerns. Yeah. Canadians expect that we take care of Canadian citizens. And right now we've got Canadians that are being detained and they don't know the reason why. They're not being afforded due process. They don't have access to lawyers. They don't know the charges against them.
No.
I mean, these are basic things that we should demand.
I covered the NDP for a long, long time. And there was a shift at one point with Jack Layton where he decided he wasn't going to, just say, I'm going to do the best I can in the election. He said he would start every speech by saying, I'm going to be Prime Minister. What is your goal in an election? Is it to do the things you've said for people, get issues on the table? Is it to win more seats? Is it that you really want to do that job, to be Prime Minister?
Absolutely. I want to be prime minister because
That's
I
the
want
goal during the election.
I
You
want
will
to
say
make,
that to people.
I want to be prime minister
Yeah.
because I want to make people's lives better.
Right.
And my paramount goal is to make people's lives better, is to improve our country on all fronts.
Thank you.
Thank you.